Welcome back. This is Dan Havey with CF Ninja Hacks. And the other day, Andrea in the Membership Ninjas group had a question, and she was building out a site, and she's working with a designer. And what they wanted to do essentially was to create basically one big long wallpaper kind of thing. I think of it as in the background. I don't have all the images in here, so the tree isn't quite matching up properly. But they basically just wanted to have this tree running down the whole thing with these arrows and the images, and then be able to just chop this up and use this as backgrounds on the sections. And that's good. We can do that. That's not a problem. But where the problem comes in is if you don't set this upright and you start moving, changing the width of the page, so you're changing the viewport on the different devices and whatnot, what it does is it distorts the image, because you can't really set the height and the width on the image and have it work when it's in responsive mode. So what we had to do is come up with a way to be able to set the images on the backgrounds of these sections so that no matter what viewport width you were in, they would always stay with the perfect aspect ratio. Whatever the aspect ratio was of the image, we wanted to be able to maintain that the entire time. Because what you're going to see over here is what they had this yellow line running across here, and this is part of the image itself. But what they had is they had text above it and they had text below it, and they wanted to keep the yellow line between the text. Well, you see here, I had to scroll up. In order to keep that yellow line there, we'd have to start with like this size of an image. But again, somebody watches this on a bigger screen, and that yellow image is going to move. It's just that's the way the images are going to work in the background. And so because of that, what we had to do was, like I said, figure out how to properly size this image. But then we also will be getting rid of this yellow line in the final background image, and we're going to put in a text element and then a divider element and a text element, and then down below here we have a paragraph of text as well. And you see on that, it only goes out partway across the screen. Again, we did not want that overlapping onto the image at all, so we set a width on that. And then we also then have the text elements up here, and again we have where they are positioned on the screen, we have that set, so they're always going to stay exactly in the same place relative to the top of that section. Right there you can see it just perfectly maintains it, and the red stays in exactly the same place between the two heading elements right there. So let's jump into the code and see how all of this works. Now the first thing we have to do is we come in and we set each one of these sections with the background image. So that's what we're going to do here. Let me close that off for right now. That's the first section. Here's the second section. And so like I said, we just come in and we put in the image there and make it fill 100% the width. So it goes all the way across. And before we do that even, what we do is we do this container inner with 100%, and set all of the containers also to a position of relative, because we are going to be positioning other things absolute inside of these containers. So, and if you see the screen flashing a little bit, that's a function of these some of these elements being absolute positioned. So that's what we do is we have this image. Now, the first thing we have to do is we're going to inspect this background image, and we have to see how big the image is. So let's go to our container. And so here's our container, and here is our image. And you see it's 1920 by 1537. So we have to figure out what the aspect ratio is as a percentage, and that means you always take the second number, which is the height, and divide that by the first number, which is the width. So it's height divided by width, so 1537 divided by 1920, and then we come into our CSS code, and we use that right here. So here we are in section number 1, and I gave this section that data title of section 1, or this one here is actually section 2. So section 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way down. So in this case here, we have section 2, and we know that the height divided by the width came out to 0.785. Now, I'm going to tell you right now, it was a little bit more than 0.785, but what I found is that most of the time, whatever you come up with a number, put it in here, you're going to find that you're going to be off by a few pixels, like 3, 4, 5 pixels. In some cases, it's not going to matter at all. In this case here, because we had the pictures, we wanted them jammed absolutely up next to each other. We had to fine-tune that number to figure out exactly what it needed to be so that these images fit together perfectly. So you see the 5 different sections we have here. This is the one up at the top, and then we had the 3 that were exactly the same size. That's why we had the 0.785 for those 3. And then the bottom one actually was much taller than it was wide. So in that case here, we get a number that is greater than 1 at that point. And so what we say is take that number, take that ratio, and multiply it times 100% of the viewport width. So we always know we want our images to be 100% of the width. So therefore, we take the 0.79 in the case of the first section, we multiply it times whatever that 100% width is in pixels, and that then becomes the height for that section. So that way, our images are always have the perfect aspect ratio according to how they were created in the first place, how that image was created in the first place. So now we come to these headline elements, and we have here headline row, because this here is a row. You can see the blue line around it. So that is a row, and I say we're going to position that absolute, and then we're going to go 5% of the viewport height down from the top. So again, we're looking here at the total height of the viewport, and we're saying, okay, 5% of that, so if the viewport height is, let's say, is 1,000 pixels, 5% of that is going to be 50 pixels, and so we want to come down 50 pixels from the top of this section. Because we're doing absolute positioning, that will position it inside of the element that it's already in. So we have a section, and then we have a row, and we're saying to position this row inside of the section itself. And so all we're saying there then is, so absolutely position it in the section, come down 5%, that's where we want this row, and you can see the row is right here. Let me in fact kill that off for a second. So here we have a text element, here is a divider element, and then here is another text element, and it is in a 2-column row, and I got the divider part right here. And let's just take a look at the divider itself. We're saying width of 100%, a line to the left, height of 15 pixels, and a color of red. And in this case here, I even had a top margin of -7. So you just got to kind of play around and get it where you want it, get it looking how you want it. So then we got to go back to our CSS. And then we got our content row, which is what I'm calling this down here. And again, we're going to absolute position it within this section. And then, and all of these are exactly the same. So every one of these sections has a headline row. Everyone has a content row. And each one of them will be positioned inside of their own section that they were created inside of. And so here we're saying we want to come down 30% of the viewport height is where we want that text to appear. And then here we have our left content column. Again, I set a data title for the left column, and we're saying we want that to only be 40% of the viewport width. So that comes over only this far. And so otherwise, like I said, we don't want it like running out over the image. So we want to be able to bound it by saying only be a certain width. And then let's see here. We got the headline divider. In order to get this to look right, we want it all the way over to the left edge. So we just put in some margin and fiddled around with that until we came up and realized it was 78 pixels. And we got that stuck over there to the left. And then we have our icon row, which is down here at the bottom. So there's a little extra thing I threw in for Andrea. We have our icon row. So there's another row down here at the bottom. And again, it's going to be tough. Well, let me turn this off. Let me turn that absolute positioning off. Now we should be able to see the row. So now here's the row over here. There's the element itself, and the row, it's being a little fussy with me. But what we're doing then is we're saying absolute position this again. So we're inside of this section, and we're saying absolutely position this at the bottom this time, and we want it to be a width of 100%. So it'll go across the entirety of the page. And then we got our page down icon, which is this right here. And we're saying put that up 50 pixels from the bottom and in 30 pixels from the right-hand side. So that's what puts it right where it is. I can take that off for a second, and you'll see it'll get right jammed down into the corner. Well, I wanted it off of there a little bit, and obviously I don't need that line of code right there. So that's all of the CSS. Now, I didn't show this to you before, but when we have one of these buttons here, what you do is you click on it, and it'll scroll you to the top of the next section. That's all it does. Is nothing too terribly fancy, but it scrolls you to the top of the next section. And so the code for that is right here. Again, it's pretty simple. So I gave each one of these little icons a data title of page down icon. And when somebody clicks on it, so that's click function. So if somebody clicks on it, we want to do something. And what we want to do is we want to animate the entire page. We want the entire page to scroll. And that's what we got going on here. So we got scroll top, this, and what the this refers to is the item that we clicked on. In this case here, again, we clicked on this icon. We clicked on this icon, and it says find this. So find the element we just clicked on and find its parent that is a container class. So again, we're saying find the section itself, find the green stuff in ClickFunnels here, find the section itself, and then we want to go to the next element, the next sibling element. But what we want to do is we want to find the first sibling element that has a class of container. It's because if we can do next all, it would normally grab all of the containers. In this case here, we're saying we just want to grab the first one of those containers. And then let me resize this, and then scroll to the top of that next container over 500 milliseconds or half a second. So that's all it does is you click the button. It says find the parent container of that button. Go to the next container element that's just like this one that we got here, and scroll that one up to the top. So that is it. So as always, if you got any questions, just let me know.